Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and if you could detect by the noise in the background, I have a guest on the show today. I'm back to talking football, actually talking Pittsburgh Steelers, more geared in that direction. So joining me today to talk some Steelers, as we can always do for as long as we would like, Mr. Black and Gold till he's dead and cold, Brian Roach. Brian, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to definitely talk some Steelers football. I'm in withdrawal.
Yeah, and you know what? Today, and I said, so we hopefully stay focused and we don't make this a 2-hour show, because it can be. I think we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to be talking quarterbacks, Steelers quarterbacks, potential Steelers quarterbacks, and guys we don't want anywhere near Pittsburgh or the Steelers, black and gold, anything. I don't even care if it's the Pittsburgh Power, which is the women's pro team. Let's just keep them far away. But there may be a few guys we might be interested in too. But let's discuss first. Basically, we have two things that are going on here, maybe three. Let's talk about the guys that are on the roster or were on the roster to finish the 2016 season. You have Ben Roethlisberger, who some people freaked out and thought was going to retire. I don't think that's going to be the case.
I agree with you. I think I understand that Ben's getting a little older and that someday we're going to have to deal with this. And I don't like to label Ben a drama queen, but sometimes I think he does say things that are said to elicit conversation or attention. Now, I'm not saying that's the case here, but he is older. I think he certainly is within his rights to reflect on how he feels, but he's got 3 years left on his contract and a lot of money sitting on the table, and I'm pretty sure he'd have to pay back a prorated version of his signing bonus. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, you know what? He had, and I ran the numbers, and I did an article, and of course, having my technical difficulties, as just telling you, I don't have it in front of me, but it's like, I don't know, $64 million or something sounds like somewhere in that ballpark. He has like 20-some million for a signing bonus per year or whatever for years left on the contract. I think he'd be leaving somewhere in upwards of almost $70 million on the table. Total, I think, in salary and bonuses and whatnot, if he were to walk away. And some of that, of course, would have to be paid back. I don't see it happening. You know what? It's not even anything really to dwell on, but some people feel, OMG, the sky is falling and Ben isn't going to be here. We're going to be stuck with Landry Jones. Well, not necessarily. Landry Jones said to be a free agent when the league year starts on March 9th. The free agency period will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And well, Kevin Colbert just had a press conference on Thursday, and he discussed that, you know what, we would like to keep Landry in the mix, so that means they might re-sign him. A lot of people are panicking about that total idea. Most of the listeners on this show already know my thoughts on Landry Jones. I've been a defender of him for a long time. I think he's capable. No one is Big Ben. No one has ever said that anyone's going to be Big Ben, and as we dive into all of these different names of past and present, not many people are. So, Landry, capable backup, what do you think?
I agree with you. As I've said many times in the past myself, I'm not a Landry hater, nor am I a pro Landry guy. I think Landry is what he is. He was drafted to be a developmental backup, and that was their goal, because they were tired of finding veteran backups who could give them a year but would get hurt, and then they were up in the air. And they wanted to develop a guy who knew the system, who understood the offense, and who could grow into the offense and could give them a capable play caller in the event that they needed a backup to play. And as far as that goes, that's what Landry Jones is, and it's what he is capable of being. He's not going to be Ben's replacement. He was never drafted to be Ben's replacement. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in free agency, because as we've said over and over again, both in podcasts and in blog entries and articles, that there are not enough starting quarterbacks to go around. And so there are a lot of teams. Hey, we could be the New York Jets or the Cleveland Browns, heaven forbid, that keep grabbing for quarterbacks that just don't work out. And one of those teams very well might throw some money at Landry Jones. Brock Osweiler got a lot. Why not Landry?
Well, kind of put me on the spot with that one. But Brock was on a Super Bowl winning team, and he had 7 starts, I think, in his career, which is just 2 or 3 more than what Landry Jones has. He actually didn't attempt too many more passes than Landry Jones did, and had a lot of money thrown at him. And I think it was one of these things where people saw he might be the heir apparent. The Broncos might franchise tag him, and they didn't, because they also had another problem. They had to franchise Von Miller, who they weren't going to let get away either, and they got stuck with a 7th-round draft pick playing potentially a large role last season, and they took a guy in the 1st round. A lot of people thought, oh, we should take him too. It's always been, and we're going to get into the whole draft. Should we draft someone? The draft is far off in the landscape, but as far as free agents and free agency, that's coming right around the corner.
Yeah.
Steelers looking to sign Jones. They could do worse. I think they're looking at this draft and not seeing a whole lot of quarterbacks that they would like or the price they would pay. We're going to discuss that as well. That'll be more of the part 2. But somebody could offer money to Landry Jones. The Jets had 4 quarterbacks on the roster last year. It just goes to show you don't always get it right. And as far as even those guys hitting free agency and whatnot, one of those will show up maybe on this list or not, Geno Smith.
Yeah.
But the Steelers, like you said, they were just screwing around with journeyman quarterbacks for as long as I can remember. The one guy they did draft that ended up playing, and he played all right, was Cordell Stewart. But for years, man, they were dealing with like the Kent Grahams and Tommy Maddoxes, and then Ben came along, and then even during Ben's tenure, I think really one of the only guys that they've drafted was Dennis Dixon recently, at least a guy that actually got to play. Whenever they had to call upon Byron Leftwich, he had 2 different stints with Pittsburgh. He was here and then gone and then back and then injured, and then Charlie Batch. They just couldn't get rid of Charlie Batch and I'm going to have a lot to say about Charlie Batch in the coming weeks too. I love Charlie Batch, but I think a lot of people have a rosier memory of him than what he actually was as a backup. So when you're talking about all of these different free agents, and then Bruce Gradkowski, of course, who will be a free agent once again, and I don't see him returning whatsoever, Brian. I think his ship has sailed. They're just sick of trying to rely on some of these guys that may have some experience, but may actually not be any better than what Landry Jones is. And let's not forget, they also picked up a guy off of waivers who's been bouncing around the league as well in Zach Mettenberger. He is the current clipboard holder.
Yeah, I think it's important for fans to understand, and for us to understand, that the reason that they decided to go down this path with Landry Jones is the offense is complex, and the offense has a lot of different aspects to it. And it's not something that somebody, a veteran even, can walk in and go, hey, I'm a master of this offense. So they wanted a backup who was going to be able to handle the offense. And that meant that they had to develop them. As much as everybody wants to scream that Zach Mettenberger should be Ben's backup and should get his chance, he's barely had any time in the offense, and certainly probably playing opposing team quarterbacks in practice last year, hasn't had a lot of snaps running the Steelers offense. So he's not going to be ready for that. Landry is the best option that they have right now. And if they can get him at the price that they're willing to pay, I think that's what they should do. But yes, Zach's there, and maybe, an 0-10 guy starting quarterback who's never won a game in the NFL somehow gets fantasized into the second coming of Tom Brady. I don't know. He deserves his chance, I guess, but we'll see what happens in preseason next year.
Yeah, it's upcoming. We didn't get to see him throw a pass as a Steeler the entire year, and there's no mistake about that. Those are the reasons why. Not prepared, comes in after when did he get cut by the Chargers? I think he played in like week 2 of the preseason for the Chargers. He threw like a handful of passes. I think he had like a pick or maybe only completed blah, blah, blah. Week 2 was a nightmare for Landry Jones too. So I'm willing to write that off, but it's just awful strange that he couldn't win a backup role behind Phillip Rivers when the head coach who selected him in Tennessee went over to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers last season. And still, that's probably the reason he came along. Should know maybe some of the playbook or have some familiarity, still couldn't keep that job. Obviously, the Steelers, I think the Steelers get enamored sometimes with what they see in games and things they see from opponents. They saw Jordan Todman, for example, run all over them with the Panthers in the preseason back in 2015. Jordan Todman ends up on the roster. Tomlin sees this large, gigantic human being across the field suited up in an Eagles uniform. That turns out to be Alejandro Villanueva, who turns out to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and a pretty darn good one, conversion project. Another guy is Zach Mettenberger. Zach Mettenberger was a thorn in their side when the Steelers went down to Nashville a couple of seasons or a few seasons ago and nearly lost that game. So obviously they think or feel there was some potential there. And don't forget these scouts, they probably looked and did their homework on that quarterback draft class that Mettenberger came out of, and they probably felt he was a guy maybe they would give a look to, but it just didn't materialize with their other needs. And we'll be talking about that, how different draft picks play into who's picked where, when, and how. But right now we're thinking Landry Jones, Kevin Colbert's even said it, it's probably going to be Landry Jones, Zach Mettenberger. They're going to see and evaluate how that goes through this year. Mettenberger is still under contract for one more season. They could give Jones 2 or 3 years on a new deal and then be patient as far as maybe grooming another young guy. But just playing devil's advocate here, if Landry Jones isn't going to be there, or Zach Mettenberger they feel is somebody that could be released, maybe isn't that strong of a guy, should they look at some of these free agents? Now, there's a number of names on this list. I'm going to spit out the very first one off the top of my head that I wrote about was Brian Hoyer. And I was on the Hoyer train all of last season. I wanted him. At the same time, we knew that Bruce Gradkowski, I don't know had he been re-signed yet, so there was still a vacancy there as far as a quarterback. We felt maybe the Steelers could draft somebody. I was against Hoyer until I started writing this article and then realized I'm still not against Hoyer. I don't know. Do you have some thoughts on Brian?
The thing is, Hoyer was in our camp for a while, right? We had him. So, he's been around us. When he was at Cleveland, he's faced us. And I don't really have a problem with Hoyer, but I do question at this point in his career whether he is not just another example of one of those quarterbacks like Bruce Gradkowski who has some potential, gets on the field, and is right back off the field because they're getting hurt. Hoyer has been beaten up the last couple of years. And so I don't know. I don't know if there's enough there to say, let's take a chance on him. Am I opposed to Brian Hoyer? I'm not opposed to Brian Hoyer. If they get to training camp and Hoyer is not around or still available and Mettenberger looks like a hot mess, hey, maybe it's worth a shot. If Landry Jones does get some kind of an offer that the Steelers simply aren't willing to match, Brian Hoyer would probably be one of the few veteran quarterbacks out there that's still in the market that I would consider. I'm not in love with him, but it's not a bad choice.
It's exactly the same way I felt. I initially was like, no way, man, because I'm thinking Brian Hoyer's damaged goods. I'm thinking the guy played in Cleveland. He couldn't do anything with that team. Confidence has to be wrecked. He blew out his knee, lost his job there. Goes down to Houston. He's supposed to be the next guy there and doesn't do so hot with all the weapons that are around him, like DeAndre Hopkins, for example. Yep. Gets shipped out of there, too. But who has been good in Cleveland? Who has been good in Houston? Nobody. Now, he didn't actually have too bad of a season with Chicago before I think he separated his shoulder. He broke his arm or something like that last season. So the Bears have to figure out exactly what they're going to do. Hoyer was 1-4 as a starter in Chicago, but he had a 67% completion percentage, which is really not shabby by any NFL standards by any means. He threw for over 1,400 yards, and he had 6 touchdowns and no interceptions, and that's with the Bears team that was missing all of their weapons. They were down to like guys who were getting called up off the practice squad playing wide receiver and tight end. I mean, they had lost Zach Miller at one point. They'd even lost their starting running backs. They didn't have Jeremy Langford. So their team was really hurting. And then, of course, they still have Jay Cutler. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do there. It's a improbability maybe that Hoyer actually hits the free agent market, but he could. Matt Barkley, their third-string quarterback who ended up taking over for both Cutler and Hoyer last season, he's set to be a free agent too. So there's a possibility Hoyer's out there. And I kind of changed my tune when I saw what he did with the Bears, thinking the Steelers, this is a talented team. If Landry Jones can do what he did, stepping in for Big Ben, there's no reason to think that Hoyer couldn't do at least that, if not better. So I look at his age. He's, he's north of 30. I'd actually had it here. He's 31 right now. He isn't 32 until October. He's about the same age bracket as Bruce Gradkowski was when we brought him in a couple of seasons ago. This is a guy that I feel if they brought in could groom the heir apparent if they gave him, let's say, a 3-year deal, and maybe he hangs around even longer, a la Charlie Batch. It's another guy that's been around many systems. Almost reminds you of kind of like how people were talking up Doug Peterson getting the head coaching job with the Eagles, and Peterson had played with so many quarterbacks and systems and whatnot, and how he could help with Carson Wentz. I think that Brian Hoyer could be a player coach in much the same way. And let's not forget, man, we're just totally disregarding or putting Big Ben in the grave. But here's a Hall of Fame quarterback that could also help as he gets up there and considers his options as he gets older.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make about Hoyer being an assistant, so to speak, to grooming someone. That would lead us back into that draft talk, which we want to keep for later. But it's not a bad choice. Now the question is, does Hoyer want to be a backup? Is he willing to say, I know I'm going to be a backup and come into that situation, or does he still think he can start? I don't know. And what kind of money is it going to take to get him here? Those are all things that play into it. And then the thing that's going to be true of all of these free agents, it's the same thing that we started off with. They don't know the playbook. And how quickly are they going to be able to learn it and become comfortable with it? Hoyer may have a slight, head start on it because at least he was in camp once. But at that point, Mettenberger's ahead of him at this point, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But who knows?
Yeah, and Hoyer had come in. There was all the injury deals that they had. I think that was the year where Leftwich got hurt, and then Ben was hurt, and then I think Leftwich was hurt, and then we were stuck with Batch. And then Hoyer had been with the Patriots, and this was the thing that was the red flag for me. He'd been with the Patriots for a while. They talk about the Patriot way. You see how everyone salivated over Matt Castle, and then he flamed out, got bounced around the league. Ryan Mallett, much the same way. Now Jimmy Garoppolo is the next guy like that too. It's always the Patriot way, Patriot way. But Hoyer didn't get quite the same love. So the Steelers know he was here for maybe 3 weeks, month, something like that in the middle of the season before he got released. He actually went to, I think he got bounced around to Arizona or somewhere, started a game there, and then that's how he landed in Cleveland. He's been all over the place. I'm trying to think where else he was. I'm going to start getting him confused with one of the guys. You know what? We may as well just fire away on this. Josh McCown would be in much the same type of camp as player coach and cost-effective type player, maybe. The price, and is he willing to be a backup? Is he willing to go to another team? Is he willing to move himself and or his family to a new city? There's all these other underlying factors with these veteran quarterbacks. The only difference is Hoyer is not only cheaper than McCown, and it's funny because McCown comes into Cleveland in place of Hoyer effectively. So, but Hoyer's 5 years younger, and he's also making less money. He's around, I think, that $2 million price tag, of which that's about what we were paying Bruce Gradkowski as well. McCown is a guy I don't see. He's 37, about to be 38 before this season even gets started. At least Hoyer has a birthday in October. I think McCown, his birthday's like in July. He's going to be 38. I don't even know that he wants to play football anymore, much less be a backup somewhere and take a pay cut from what he was making in Cleveland.
Yeah, I don't know what the number was he was getting in Cleveland, but he certainly is getting more, or was getting more there than he's going to get as a backup anywhere. If you're 38 years old and you have taken the pounding that he took last year in Cleveland, it won't surprise me if McCown decides he wants to go be a backup someplace where he can sit safely on the bench and only need to play in an emergency. And that way, extend his career a little bit and make some money. But the question really is whether he wants to go through all that would be required and the preparation. And as you said, move to a new city, go through everything that goes along with moving away from Cleveland. Some of us might say, as soon as you're released from Cleveland, you're not moving away, you're running away. But, it's a possibility. I would choose Hoyer over McCown simply because of the age situation. And, once quarterbacks get up into their high 30s, for the most part, they become very fragile.
Yeah, and McCown has never been known to be an Iron Man. I had a list of all the teams he's been on here. And let me see, 38 in July, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to actually pull down here. Okay, Lions, Raiders, Dolphins, Panthers, 49ers, Bears, Buccaneers, and then, of course, the Browns. It sounds so funny. And I mentioned this with somebody else that I had as a guest. It may have even been you, Brian, and where I was talking about his daughter and her friends. They had like some type of football day at school or something, dress down day, and they wore all of Dad's jerseys, being Josh McCown being the dad we're talking about, and they had more jerseys than they had girls to wear them. So it was funny. It was like that awkward moment. It was one of those type of tweets, that awkward moment when there's less girls than jerseys for girls, so to wear them. But he went to Cleveland. He had a 3-year deal that was worth $14 million. You do the math there, whatever bonuses and things that were in. I was trying and pull that up, but Gronkowski was making 1.5 to 2 per year, and then of course Hoyer was about a $2 million deal as well with the Bears last year. The biggest thing with McCown is that he's just never been a winning quarterback. He was 10-12 with Arizona, his first team, and that was with 22 starts and 33 appearances. He was 2-7 in Oakland. In both circumstances, he threw more picks than he threw touchdowns. He was then 1-10 with the Buccaneers, where again he had 11-14 touchdown to interception ratio. He was 1-10 in Cleveland. He actually threw more touchdowns in Cleveland, believe it or not. I don't know who to, but 18-10 ratio there. His career record overall is 18-42. He has 59.1% completion percentage and 79-69 touchdown to interception ratio. Just quite frankly, for the cost it might take. And then the other decisions, of course, moving on from Landry and or Zach Mettenberger, is this a guy you really want to risk? I don't think so. And it's going to be kind of the, what do you want to say, MO for a few of these other names that are out there.
Yeah.
A guy that's been bounced around a lot, unless you have something else to say about McCown. I want to talk about Nick Foles next.
Oh, no, let's move on because I think the only other thing I can say is I would really love it if Steelers Nation could let go of the idea that the black and gold uniform has some kind of magic infused in it that will turn all bad players from other teams into superstars as soon as they sign with the Steelers.
You mean like Michael Vick?
Yeah, like Michael Vick, like Justin Gilbert, like anybody who gets released at any point in time. We kind of internally crack up about it and talk about how, okay, pretty soon we're going to start hearing the tweets, oh, the Steelers need to look at him. No, they really don't. And the same is true of McCown and pretty much everybody else on this list, that magically putting them in the black and gold is not going to change who they are.
Yeah, and there's a few guys here. Now, I may make some exceptions. I had said, like, there's some names I'm not even going to bring up. Case Keenum is supposed to be a upcoming free agent from the Rams. If you're the Rams, I don't know what they're going to do there unless they sign somebody else. Jared Goff better be the guy. But Nick Foles, he got shipped out of there. He was also kind of after he got sent away and traded. He got traded for Sam Bradford. That's number one red flag. And then he demanded. They went and drafted and they traded away like half of their future. They just mortgaged the house and then refinanced a few times in order to get Goff, and decided to play Case Keenum. Of course, that's Jeff Fisher, the second losingest coach in NFL history. So I won't put too much stock in that. But Foles is about to be sent packing from the Chiefs because he has a huge roster bonus. He only made $1.5 million last year. He was due to make $6 million this season. Does he think he could be the Pro Bowl player he was in Philadelphia prior? I don't necessarily see it. If you're going to take a stab at any of these guys, and I got one polarizing one at the end, but let me throw out two more names. A lot of people are really hot on Mike Glennon from the Buccaneers. There's another guy that, we saw him beat us, so we think, oh my goodness. And the same is going to be with A.J. McCarron. We saw A.J. McCarron play as well. It's just, I don't know. I think it's all nonsense. These guys, their stock is going to be higher. I think Glennon and McCarron for sure.
Absolutely. First of all, they're younger, and the youth is on their side. So there are going to be other teams that are going to be willing to say, hey, maybe this guy can be the guy that we haven't been able to find. Glennon has a little bit of a track record. McCarron doesn't have much of one. But I think in both situations, as we've said again, the problem with bringing them on board with us is now we are taking a 3 or 4 year veteran and trying to turn them into Landry Jones 4 years ago, because they have no familiarity with the Steelers offense. They have no familiarity with the Steelers players. They don't have a clue. They're coming in completely blind. They are not going to be good initially. They need to learn the offense. It's complex. And so, to bring one of them in is not ideal for us, unless Landry stays and Mettenberger is so bad that he goes away. In that case, hey, you know what? Why not take a flyer on McCarron, and put him back in that role and say, let me see if I can groom Landry's replacement. Because look, the truth is these guys are Landry's replacements, not Ben's.
Yeah, quite frankly, and I think this is going to be more or less the issue. Once you pay Landry Jones, they're not going to pay money for another quarterback. Not any substantial money, not even $1 million, I don't think. It's going to be under. It's going to be, Mike Vick got the league minimum. Gronkowski was under $1 million last year. And McCarron and Glennon both, they're going to probably command some dollars. We saw a ridiculous contract for Chase Daniels. I think he got something very similar. I think it was $12 million for 3 years, and don't quote me on that, but it was definitely over $10 million. It was definitely for 3 years to be a backup in Philadelphia. He came along with Doug Peterson, who was the offensive coordinator with the Chiefs last year, and I just remember a lot of people were hot on wanting to get Chase Daniels, just like we were hot on wanting to get Brian Hoyer. And I think when you look at Mike Glennon, there had been trade talks, and the Buccaneers wanted a whole lot of that farm in order to get him away. The Bengals may be in a similar situation with McCarron versus Jones. I don't know how high his stock is. It might be higher than Landry Jones's is. I don't know that for sure. I'm not an NFL executive over here. But if I had to place a guess, I'd say he's about in the same boat. I think the Bengals would want to bring him back and pay him the backup money. He's been on a rookie deal as well. So I don't see Mettenberger's making the waiver wire money. He's making around the minimum, and it's not a whole lot of money, and it's not much more than they're going to want to invest. If they want to invest anything like that, they're just going to invest a draft pick in a clipboard holding guy. So none of those guys seem realistic to me. Nick Foles is going to look for a starting job. I think Mike Glennon might be in the running for a starting job, or at least a camp competition. None of those guys are going to see that here in Pittsburgh. I got another name that I'm just dying to say, Brian. The very last one of these free agents or potential free agents, and we saw an article that was released. I just have to laugh. I don't know if this is like the Onion reporting this, but some people said that Colin Kaepernick would be interested in a backup role with the Steelers. He wasn't even interested in being a backup with San Francisco. Not to mention all of the other baggage, whether you agree or disagree. And I had the politics podcast already out. It's a Joe's pet peeve thing. I don't talk politics on this show, but we could just at least agree that there are politics that come with Colin Kaepernick. I don't see the Rooneys or the Steelers front office and organization wanting that baggage coming along with Colin Kaepernick, aside from his ability on the football field.
Oh, it's even simpler than that, I think. Do you not remember what James Harrison said he would do to someone on his sidelines doing what Colin Kaepernick did?
And it basically involves a beating.
Yeah, exactly. It's more the thing that people consistently say, players, fans, anybody that say about the Steelers organization is it's a family. These guys bond. And Kaepernick is not someone who's going to come in and meld into that unique dynamic easily. I mean, it is as simple as you said. He's got baggage the Rooneys are going to have any interest in toting. It's not the kind of attention the Steelers ever want to have. And it would be, in my mind, unthinkable for the Rooneys to offer Colin Kaepernick any kind of even a visit. Not because of that he doesn't have the right to do whatever he's doing, but simply because it's not the way they run their business.
Yeah, and again, I don't think he's a guy that he's probably going to want more money than they're willing to part with.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's looking for maybe to be a starter somewhere still. He still believes that. And, and this is all aside. This is almost like the Terrell Owens discussion with the Hall of Fame that people say off-field stuff, but it really does translate into the business of football. And the Steelers are already dealing with, they're still trying to put out fires with Martavis Bryant and Le'Veon Bell. And then there's always like all kinds of just hoopla that surrounds whether it's Ben Roethlisberger or Antonio Brown, even though some of it isn't even merited. It's just made up or just nonsense. But they don't need yet another element of that. So that about wraps it for the free agents. You take a look around, and I don't think any of these names are really jumping off the page. Do you really want to spend money for any of these guys? I don't. I don't feel that Case Keenum or Sean Hill or some of those guys are worth putting in here versus a Landry Jones. I think really the only guy is Brian Hoyer, and that's about it.
Yeah, and I think that the philosophy the Steelers have, and it fits well and is really played out to the most effect here, is sign your own. And if we bring Landry back in, it's the best option of any potential free agent quarterback out there. The best option for the Pittsburgh Steelers is to re-sign Landry Jones.
Totally agree with you, Brian. And so, as you could tell, we could talk a lot just about free agents or impending free agents or guys we think are probably going to be free agents. We just don't think any of those guys will be Steelers. We're going to reconvene here soon, and we're going to talk draft, and we're going to talk about who's available in the draft. We're going to talk about past drafts. We're going to talk about whether even taking Landry Jones was a decent decision in the first place. So, but until then, you know what, Brian? Thank you for joining me once again, and we're going to definitely connect and do part 2 of this here in the near future.
Thanks, Joe. It's always a pleasure.
And folks, there you have it. Love to hear your thoughts on who you think should be a backup quarterback and who could have potential to possibly step in and fill Big Ben's shoes, whether he be hurt, whatever else. Just don't come up with draft picks because we're going to do that next time. Until that next time, be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.